here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Ron Ward, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Member of Speedball Baby, but was in various other bands as well, called Blood Oranges, also $5 Priest, and various other musical combos. Anyway, you're going to find out much more in this fascinating interview. So after several minutes of interesting but slightly casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Ron, it's over to you.
Well, I had a very sort of weird awakening because I grew up in Vermont, and I ended up in New York and Boston really pretty early on. But when I was a kid, I mean, it was we listened to Johnny Winter, things like that. Roy blues stuff, Roy Gallagher. But then I got into Lou Reed.
Right.
And I remember I tell my wife the story. When I was like 17 or 18, I got Metallic KO, and it came with a patch that I sewed on my jacket. And I was like, I loved Iggy, but my friends really didn't know who it was. And then you'd play it at parties and they'd be like, take that off, man. But I had I had a big change when I moved to, I came down in New York young, but I went to school in Boston, and then I got really into the Boston bands, like the Real Kids and the Liars and, Neighborhoods. And, when I was in bands like that, they influenced me. And of course, all the New York punk no wave bands I loved.
Yes.
That was kind of my thing as a young kid. I listened to a lot of bubblegum pop music.
Well,
with my 45s. I had a big collection of 45s. I mean, was record collector and shit, and someone who likes all kinds of music, soul music. So, but I really came to really understand music when I moved to Boston and saw really cool bands. And I was in some early bands in Burlington, Vermont.
Yes, because a couple of years ago I did an interview with this photographer who did this amazing book on the Boston scene. Have you got that one?
I don't. I'd love to get it though, man.
Because he did all.
It's Jim Sullivan. Is what wrote the foreword. I know Jim. Yes, he's a big writer. Yeah, I don't have this, but I want it actually. Yes. I knew a lot of those people. I lived with John from the Real Kids for a short period, and I knew I knew all the Burma guys. That was my I fell into that world. My roommate was in the Volcano Sons, and I played in Dreadful and the Din for a bit, drums, because I'm a drummer as well, other than singer. So I played with a lot of those Boston cats, and I love those bands. They're really great bands.
I didn't realize, because the photographer was saying that he just happened to be at the right place at the right time, but all the UK bands going over would play Boston. That was kind of on the circuit.
The Rat.
So that was
the Rat, which was the equivalent of the CBGBs in Boston, or you play the Paradise. And I saw like a lot of great British bands.
Yes.
In Boston, because the people were really enthusiastic about music there. It's really
I guess with the UK bands, you just tour the East Coast first, then you might do a few others, and then the next time you do the West Coast. Or if you're completely nuts, you try and do all of it and then have a nervous breakdown when you
have a nervous breakdown and you lose a shitload of money.
and you definitely lose various
or you
members.
Get beat up. Back in those days.
It doesn't ever end well, does it, really?
No.
And were your parents at all influential in your kind of upbringing at this stage? Were they at all into music or anything like that?
Yeah, they were. They were like they were more into it's like rockabilly, hillbilly music.
Right.
And they were good. I was telling my friends they were really good dancers. They could dance to a hillbilly music, and I used to be kind of embarrassed, but yet in awe of them when they danced. You know what I mean? When you see your parents getting like kind of oddly sexual with dancing, you're just like, oh, that's weird, but that's cool.
Yes, no, you don't
So
really
yeah,
want.
I mean, my parents took me to see, I saw Johnny Cash, I saw, you know, Loretta Lynn. I saw a lot of people because I lived near a fairgrounds, and we would go see things. And I love that music because the bands were the players were all really good too. Could tell, man. It's like these people are into what they're doing, man.
Yes, well, absolutely. And at the time, we don't appreciate these things, and afterwards, you
We
think
don't. No, I just thought it was kind of square,
it was. Well, yes, my parents also like country, and
Yeah.
I found it quite grating. It was up there with opera, but years later,
Yeah.
you start
Right.
to listen to Americana, and then you start sort of
Yeah.
appreciating
Then we get into
storytelling.
Hazel Atkins and all this crazy ass shit. You know what I mean? Like real weird rockabilly stuff that takes it even further out, and that's pretty groovy shit too.
Yes, because actually there was a kind of a UK band that were picked up by a guy called Lee Black Childers from. He
Yeah.
saw some good-looking guys in Essex who couldn't. Well,
Of
one of them
course.
definitely couldn't play music, and he took them to New York. Thought, oh yes, we'll be in a band. It's a bizarre story, but that they turned out to be Levi and the Rockettes.
Oh
With
yes, that's
and
so funny because we talk about them because I'm doing this new project that Fred Smith's in from the television, and this thing Taxi Girls is me and John Spencer and Fred and Grasshopper from Mercury Rev and this other guy Chris Turco, but they were friends with it because I always liked Levi and the Rockettes when I was young, but they're good friends with him. So their name, the name comes up every now and again because they were cool people and a really cool band. So that's funny.
Yes. Well, I think they were kind of one of the early bands at that time in New York playing music. And also, Smutty Smith was very good looking. He had a couple of tattoos on him. And Robert
Yeah,
Mapplethorpe did those famous photographs that we
yeah,
now
yeah.
look at. But he just
Pre
thought,
Stray Cats,
yes,
but
pre Stray
actually,
Cat.
I actually almost more handsome, even in a
They
weird
were
way.
much more
Wilder.
they just couldn't get that hit single, could they,
They
like the
couldn't.
Stray Cats? But
Nah, they just
I didn't
couldn't.
realize that New York, well, I do now, but had such a variety of post-punk music, really. The punk scene and a lot of British people will say the punk scene quickly becomes quite Sham 69. It's a bit shouty, it's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
bit blokey. Whereas the
yeah.
New York post-punk scene, no wave scene, has got an interesting musical palette, really, hasn't it?
Hmm.
It brings in avant-garde jazz, it brings in African rhythms, amazing guitar, funk guitar. And people don't all just want to look like Sid Vicious, which is quite a good thing, really. Whereas
Yes, yes,
punk, punk,
absolutely.
punk becomes quite poor. So look, when you get to 16 in this country, you often leave school. What happens to you at 16 then?
At 16, I finished high school, and then I went to a small school in Vermont, like a sort of an art school, a state college, Johnson State, where I met a lifelong friend of mine who I ended up playing in. I think it's maybe one of the first punk band in Vermont called Pinhead, and then we were in a band called Blood Oranges, which I played drums in, which was a hillbilly band that sort of was based in Boston, but Mark lived in New York and I lived in New York as well. And Jimmy, the mandolin player, plays with a lot of people. Laura Cantrell, they went off. I went a different direction. Didn't want to. I wanted to just go into more of like the Beefheart direction of stuff and
Yeah.
free, a little more free. And then I went to school there, and then and got some chops together as a drummer. And then I moved to Boston. I went to a school called Suffolk University, and that's when I fell in with a lot of Boston people. And I started playing drums with some people, and then I had some projects where I sang
Yes.
various people. And then I moved to New York, and that's when it all just started really sort of happening. I met Matt Verderay, and it was a wonderful wonderful.
So going back to your time with Blood Oranges,
Yeah,
they do 2 albums, don't they? Corn
yeah,
River and The Crying
yeah. That was the
Tree.
one that I did, which I wrote some of the songs. I left after that record, but that was the initial thing. Jimmy and I wanted to do something that wasn't punk rock, but wasn't. He was always he played in bluegrass bands, and I knew him in Vermont when he was. I used to go with my parents to bluegrass festivals, and I saw Jimmy. He's only a couple of years older than me, and I would see him play. He was in a band called Pine Island, and I just I'd always liked the guy, and I would talk to him and stuff. And then we ended up just meeting. He moved to Boston, and we became friends. And we were like, what do we want to do? We don't want to play punk in a punk band. Everyone's doing that, so we just got into this traditional hillbilly thing that and we didn't want it to be cow punk either,
Yes.
which was a big thing out in LA. Blood on the Saddle, which I like a lot of those bands. Don't get me wrong, they're cool bands. But we wanted to be just more really sort of hillbilly punk sort of, and we sort of pulled that off. It got a little slicker than I would have liked, and that's why I sort of departed.
Yes.
I wanted something different.
I was a big fan of Laura Cantrell. I still am, because I've seen
Yeah,
her, and she came
does
to the
well
UK.
in England, from what I understand. Yeah,
She does very well. John Peel picked her up, and
yeah.
not literally, but became quite obsessed with. And I guess that's why we all know her well. So what happens to you during the 80s then? Because this is the period of sort of goth, psychobilly, indie pop, then the rave culture. Were you still quite young at this stage?
Yeah, I was in my 20s, and I was in a psychedelic sort of psych band called Junk Ranchers in Boston, but I had side projects I was doing as well. Um, it and just was doing was busy going to school, really trying to graduate. Uh,
Yes.
and I managed to do that, which is shocking. But I went and saw a lot of music in Boston, had a really wonderful time. Found
Because
out that
I was going to say, in
yeah,
this country, during the late 80s, we had that kind of the change with ecstasy came along. So there was a dance scene. And then obviously, especially from Manchester. And then there was Seattle grunge. So did that sort of permeate into your consciousness at that stage? Kind of.
I got to tell you, not to sound like some, but I kind of didn't want to be remotely like that in any capacity. That was their trip. New York and Boston, we weren't. It just, I don't know. It was a whole thing. I felt grunge was just a little too cock rocky for me. I didn't. It just wasn't my. Even though I think Nirvana, those bands are great. I've met nice people. I like the early version of Seattle, like the U-Men. There were some great bands like Dead Moon,
Mhm.
who were from that area of Oregon and stuff. I sort of like that pre-grunge period of bands more. I could relate to them more. I understood where grunge came from. It just wasn't me. I just was not. I grew up with flannel shirts, man. I couldn't wait to get one off. You know what I mean?
Yes, this is
I
this
wanted
is
to look like James Chance, man.
well, yes, I
Who
know.
I later played on my records, and I became very close with. So
My God,
uh,
that's amazing. Yes.
So that's where I was at. I mean, I suppose, and but I don't take anything from those groups. They had massive energy, and some of them were really innovative and cool. And so I don't want to knock them. Like Mudhoney, I really like Mark. The guys, they're all really good people, and did some really like their early singles. They're wonderful. But it was just a direction that I just didn't really have any sort of affiliation with. I remember when I first heard Nirvana, I was working at a record store. I mean, I was such a cynical shit. I thought they sounded like Kansas or something.
Right.
And
Yes.
that's terrible to say in a weird way, but I did. I just thought it was just like, it just was so 3 chord, down, 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 even though Kurt was doing really weird tuning and stuff, but it was just so sort of straight rhythm. I wanted to take things out more.
Yes.
You know, James Chance meets Ornette or meets, Archie Shepp or something,
God, yes. My
throw it
God.
then and put it through a grinder of Hazel Atkins, and it, you know what I mean? That's not that it really sounded that way.
Well, it's good to be experimental, isn't it? Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
somewhat, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, we all
I
love
mean,
to.
it's good. It's good. I'm happy with when I listen to the stuff. I'm like, yeah, it was pretty good. We took a couple of chances, and that's cool.
I remember discovering, well, I didn't personally, but Jim Jarmusch movies, and he used to have an actor, didn't he? John Lurie, who was a
Yeah,
cool cat. Was it the Lizard something that he had a band?
the
And
lounge was.
the Lounge, and we all sort of wanted to really love that music, but it was quite difficult as well. But you persevered just to try and be hip and cool. When you're young,
Yeah.
that is.
Have you read his book? The something Bones. I have it here someplace.
I've got it. I have to confess, I've got it in the Amazon basket, but I haven't hit play buy
Yeah,
because
there's some good stuff in it. He's his own best fan.
yes, I would imagine he is. I think he's an artist now, isn't he? As well, he's a
He
painter.
does. Yeah, and I really he had this drummer Dougie Bound, who'd also played with Iggy, who's an old friend, who's one of the sweetest guys, one of the best drummers ever, who played with them. And I always like listening to the records just to hear his drumming.
Yes. Were you kind of particular being a drummer? Because I did an interview with dear old Hunt Sells, who was in Iggy's band,
Yeah,
and Tim. I mean, he's a very much a jazz drummer. That was his background, isn't it? Did
yeah.
you also get drumming lessons and get tutored by various jazz?
I didn't get drumming lessons, but I did. I did do a fair amount of lessons when I was younger, and could read and stuff when I was younger. But I kind of I threw it out to my chagrin. I threw it out the window. I wish I could read music more. My drumming just comes from. I'm not a great rock drummer. I was a pretty good shuffle drummer and hillbilly drummer, and I can play some jazz stuff, sort of a little more out jazz stuff. I'm pretty good with time signatures, but I call in good drummers to play with me.
Yes. Yes, everyone always says the drummer makes a band,
It does. I mean, I've been lucky to play with some really great drummers.
Yes. So after Blood Oranges, what's your next musical combo? Is it Speedball?
Yeah, that was What Matt and I, we were friends, but and my first wedding was the first time we'd actually played together. I was having a a wedding party, and we had a bunch of people were there, musician people, and everyone was playing. And Matt got up. We'd never played together, and I did something off the cuff, and he's like, "We got to start a band," and
Yes.
and that's what happened. And then we hooked up with PCP, and which is it was a really cool label, did a lot of great stuff, and Matador was involved with that.
That's right, the PCP. So that was kind of big on the entertainment front, wasn't it? PCP Records or entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, he got some attention right off in England with NME and Melody Maker, and some of it was pushed from I think with Matador at the time, and we just went from there. And then Larry from In the Red picked us up, and we did stuff and some stuff with Sympathy for the Record Industry. And I mean, it was a wild ride. I don't know if you've read the book.
Yes.
Yeah, it was. It's like that's maybe only half of what happened.
Right. Yes.
I used to keep a lot hidden, to tell you the truth, but that's okay. I mean, it's like it was fun, and we got along. really well, considering how bad things can go with bands. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, absolutely. I mean,
At each other's throats, and we weren't like that. We weren't like that. We went through a lot of stuff.
so what New York at that time, the late 70s, 80s, it's quite, from a lot of the interviews I've done, quite grim. What's it like in the 90s? How is it what's the political and cultural and the sort of the general scene like in New York at this stage?
Well, let me grab a drink here.
Yes, yes, do grab a drink. Do grab a drink. Oops, I'll hit pause. So look, I just
Yeah,
paused it there.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
so New York, what's it like at this stage?
Well, it was, man, I got to tell you, I mean, for the late 80s, early 90s was really fun time in New York. I mean, it doesn't quite get its credit because people talk, it is now, but people talk a lot more about the late 70s and, the Voidoids and television and Patti Smith and all that stuff, which was a wonderful time.
I think it was because, and also you had the CBGBs and the Mud Club, didn't you? And then
Yeah, and we those places were great. But in the '90s there were a lot of clubs in the Lower East Side, which there aren't now. There are some that have popped up, but as a whole, there was a lot of stuff going on, and not just the music, but a lot in the art scene as well. And there was like a lot of drugs and and it wasn't expensive yet.
no.
Everything was really cheap, and it was really like a playground in some ways for misfits. And I fit right in, man. I was like, I love this place. When I go on tour, I couldn't wait to get back home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was
You
kind
know,
of interesting the way the 90s changed so much, didn't it? I mean,
yeah,
I'm sort of hinting towards having seen the film Woodstock 99, where it kind of starts quite sensitively with Kurt Cobain talking about
yeah,
quite deep and meaningful things and seems to end quite drastically with Woodstock 99, doesn't it?
yeah,
And
yeah. It does. So it's quite sad, actually.
it's quite an amazing decade, actually. How do you sort of, when you look at that or think about it or reflect on it, how do you sort of see the music scene changing during that period? Because it's quite a shift, isn't it? No one could see that coming.
Yeah, I think it was the breakup of the record companies. A lot of the record companies that were signing cool bands we would hang out and party with and have fun with them, and sometimes we made them a lot of money. And what happened is they were taking groups such as ours, because we did get signed to MCA, which wasn't a totally bad thing. But they were basically, because of Nirvana and a lot of other bands, Dandy Warhols and all that shit, they were throwing stuff against the wall like spaghetti. And if it stuck, boom, there you go. You
Yes.
sell 50,000 records really quick, man, that we keep you around. But if you don't in those first number of months, forget about you. Even though you might just need that extra push to be, you know what I mean? And it started becoming more about that, and things started just like falling apart where they were just trying to get overt commercial things, and then it just turned into like pop shit, you know what I mean? Or stuff that was just middle of the road. That's the way I saw it. And but that wasn't, I mean, there's still a scene. For us it was going to Europe,
Right.
and that was really what it was about. It was going to Europe and having fun, and having meals, and having a van. We had Paperclip, which was in Amsterdam, which was a great booking agency who'd done tons of New York punk bands and stuff. So it was like a lot easier and fun. And you come back to the States, and even if you're selling a club out, you're lucky you can't even get a case of beer. you know what I mean?
Yes.
You're like, you get of like 3.2 alcohol beer. You know what I mean? They're just like, they got no money. They got not, everybody's just, so that's sort of, I think it was probably that way in England as well.
Yeah.
Uh, That's the impression I got when we were playing in England. Sometimes it was a little similar to the States in that way.
I think it changed quite a lot. I think that whole rise of suddenly a few years of that Brit pop period where most of those bands would have just been on indie labels selling a few, I don't know, quite a lot, in retrospect, quite a lot of records, but still not denting the major charts, but would be in the independent charts, but were very much there. And suddenly they were on top of the pops, and they were suddenly becoming headline acts at sort of festivals, whereas in the old days, they would have been on the alternative stages around the back somewhere. But suddenly they escalated. It did change quite rapidly, actually. And so there was that sort of sudden, like you were talking about record labels, suddenly they just want to sign a guitar band, don't they? That sounds quite chirpy. And
yes, exactly.
Just so many bands got signed, and so many dreadful bands got signed, and even they admit that it was like, I can't believe it, but they got the big check, and obviously that never goes well, does it? It never ends well. When
it really doesn't. I remember people giving us shit for signing with the MCA, even though it was part of the Fort Apache thing, which is a great studio in Boston, and we were friends with. That's where all the Belly came up out of there, and a lot of like bands that weren't so much like Speedball Baby. We were definitely the of that whole sort of thing. we were the black sheep by all means.
Yes.
But it's that Sean, Paul Coldery and Sean Slade were old friends of mine from when I was going to school in Boston. And so it was a great studio and stuff, but we kind of knew that, man, this might not, and it just didn't fly well with MCA. They just knew.
Because you did a 4-track EP for PCP, didn't you? Which had Speedball Baby and Fucked Up Town, Black Eyed Girl.
Yes, that was the first one. Yeah.
And were you pleased with the results on that one?
Mm-hmm.
Was that everybody happy at that stage?
It was so fucked up that the track listings were wrong. But we liked it. We didn't even try to change it.
Yes.
Peter just like, he didn't have them right. And we were just like, he's like, oh, I fucked up. And you're like, that's okay. No, that record is great, and Get Straight for the Last Supper is really cool. Those were Matt and I just trying to do like something almost performance wise rather than song orientated. Even though there were some songs, we were just trying to do something different, and it turned out I those things sound cool.
Yes,
and they sound cool.
And how was the band holding it together at this stage? Because was there already quite an indulgence of drugs at this point?
At that point, yeah, no. I mean, frankly, that didn't play as big a part as one might think. It probably did with me. It didn't with Allie at all, and it didn't with Martin, the drummer.
Right.
And it didn't really with Matt. It was me pretty much. But I would, as you read in the book, I would clean my act up before I would go on tours, because it's not good to be out with someone who has a lot of issues with that stuff.
Yes, it can lead to problems.
You don't want to do that to people. It's like puts really bad. The one situation that's in the book, that wasn't fun. It's like, that sucked, man. It just wasn't cool. But it's what it was, and. But those guys as a whole, that the band, they were pretty cool about stuff, kept things at home. But believe me, no one was a teetotaler in the band. We had a lot of, because we would always bring our own little record player and our 45s and shit, and we would dance after shows, and we always made a little party after we played, and it was really a fun thing, And we try to get bands that open that were like-minded and stuff. So it was like just, having fun.
Yes. You did one more release on PCP, didn't you? Get Straight for the Last
Yeah,
Supper.
we did Get Straight for the Last Supper. Yes, and then we did the one that has Kid Congo's on the cover of that. It's I'm Gonna Stomp Harry Lee. That was sympathy for the record industry, and that was a real character guy. I forget his name. Do you know the label? The name
Oh,
Long Gone John was it?
right.
Long Gone John, and he was like his name sort of fit. He's a cool guy. I liked him. He was funky, and then Larry in the Red, who's a really righteous, cool guy. I really can't say enough about Larry Hardy. He just believes in if he likes you, he loves you. Like he and I did. I was in $5 Priest as well. I don't know if you know that.
No.
But no, yes. I guess I'm skipping some stuff.
$5
I did
Priest.
3 records with this band, which was my solo thing after Speedball Baby, which was myself singing. Bob Burke played drums on the first record, and Norm Westberg from the Swans, and Bob, who was in, Sonic Youth to Knoxville Girls, and
Yes.
played, plays with Lydia, has been playing with Lydia Lunch. Uh, we had this group that we were doing, and we did 3 records for Bang Records, which is from Spain, and they do a
Oh,
lot of reissues of stuff. They've done Gun Club stuff, The Scientists, real
right.
rock and roll. And what we were doing was a lot more disjointed and a little weirder than all the other stuff. But I got to give it to them. They put 3 of our records out, and they're pretty left of center. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
But
Were
yeah,
you working with
$5
John?
Priest.
Were you working with John Spencer as well on that project?
No, this new thing we're doing now. I worked on a spoken thing with John that I did. But this new thing we're doing now is called Taxi Girls, and it's John plays and sings backups on it. They're my songs, and we have a second single coming out on this label from Australia, and then Bang, I think, is going to do a full length of it.
Blimey.
And it's this guy that used to work for a Go-Go and Missing Link. This guy Scotty, who's putting it out. But yeah, that is with John, and Fred plays bass on the new thing that's coming out, and Grasshopper, and yeah. But the 3 the things I did in $5 Priest, I really like a lot. They're really great records.
Yes.
To find them, if you can find them.
I will. I could see them on Discogs, actually.
Yeah.
But before that, so did you have a bidding, going back to Speedball, did you have a bidding war for your first album on a major label at this stage?
Yeah, there was some weird stuff that went on with it. Yeah. There's one thing in the book about, I think that might have been the Geffen guy who took us out. And we just, I just got whacked, got fucked up. It was like, I just didn't like the way things were going down. I don't know what it was. I think there was, I don't want to get into it, but it was like, it just got into like some weird pissing contest who could drink more, do
Right.
more. And Allie kept saying to the guy, "You're going to lose, man."
My God, that sounds quite the moment. So who was it who from MCA that managed to sort of secure the signature of the band?
Well, it was really Paul Coldery and Sean Slade, but the guy Gary Smith. I don't know if you know Gary. He passed away. He was a manager. He managed a lot of the Boston bands from. He did Morphine, Belly, a lot of the Throwing Muses. A lot of those people I know from Boston. And they had their in-house sort of stuff that they did at Fort Apache, which was really a great studio. A lot of really good bands came out of there. some of it's not my cup of tea, but it sounds great. Joanna Hatfield, stuff like that. What I do is a lot different than that, but I can appreciate good talent and good.
Yes.
You can appreciate it, and they were hardworking people. A lot of those bands, and like I said, really nice people, most of them. I was actually was in a pre thing with Mark from Morphine called Treater Orange. He used to be in a group called Treater Right,
Right.
which was yeah. And I was in Blood Oranges, and Jimmy, the mandolin player, myself, and Mark, and the harp player, who ended up playing with the Jim Fitting. We used to have a thing called Treater Orange, and I remember it was pre Morphine, but I remember doing we did some Morphine things. I was playing drums, and we didn't do a record or anything, but we used to play out live and stuff. It was fun.
Yes.
Fun. Mark was a creative guy, and really believed in the cause.
Well, absolutely. Morphine had a great vibe and a great groove, didn't it? Or they did.
And just really nice people too, like Billy Conway, who's passed, and Dana, the sax player. Just really, they're all really beautiful people. That's in the long run, that's what really counts.
Yes, because I think did he die of a heart attack on stage?
Yeah, he died of a heart attack in Italy. I was in Montreal playing a gig in Montreal when it happened, and someone just came backstage and said, "Mark Sandman died." I was like, "What?" Because he wasn't like a drug guy, unlike Morphine, the name of the band.
Yes.
Mark he wasn't that guy. He was a red wine drink, that's he and I had that because I like good wine, and he, we would, that was something he was into. But he was into weed, and he just wasn't into hard chemicals or anything. It was just a weird thing.
It was very strange. Must have had some little defect.
Well, years ago, what I can tell you, year before that, when I very first met him, he was driving a cab and he got stabbed once in a really bad part of Boston. And I remember he got it hit, and I don't know if maybe that had something to do with it. And I don't know, but
yes,
was laid up for a while with that. He wasn't very old when that happened.
No, that's the freaky thing, isn't it? We suddenly get a bit worried about these things. So when you came to do your first album with MCA, what was the kind of creative process of the band at this stage? How did you go about writing the songs? Who? How did these come out? Did you have a couple of people in the band, or did you?
It was really Matt and I generally. Matt and I wrote most of the material, generally speaking. Allie had some contribution to some of the stuff, but it was generally he and I are credited for almost most of it.
Right.
We would get together, and I'd usually have an idea for something, and I would just, basically play it on drums and hum it or yell it. You know what I mean? And I would yell the words because I always have the words beforehand written out, so it would always sort of relate to what the story I told with the words, and that's how we did it. And then we'd bring everyone in and just say, "Hey, this is the part, and let's do this." And it was a pretty simple process. And working with Matt was wonderful. It was very easy. It was always usually a lot of fun. There wasn't any big egos going on, so it was a really cool process.
Was it Matt who was connected to Madder Rose as well?
Yeah, he was the original bass player, and he actually left Madder Rose to do Speedball Baby because he wanted to be a guitar player.
Right.
And he wanted to do something different. Their whole thing is the opposite of what we do. But
yes.
I was friends with them. I knew them before. In fact, I think I introduced Mary to Billy, and they ended up getting married.
Right.
I was the initial, because I knew her from people from Boston.
Jeezy Greasy. That's just so many connections you make here,
Yeah, and
really.
Billy was looking to, uh, um, you know, put something together, and he was looking for like a singer. And I knew Mary was a great singer. So they hooked up, and it was great. I mean, my favorite thing of theirs is that first EP they did, like a 4-track EP. The Matarose EP is really still my favorite thing. I still can listen to it and gives me chills. Uh,
Yes.
it's like the Velvets meets the Lower East Side, 8th Street, and Avenue D. Whenever I hear that, it takes me right back there.
Yes, absolutely. So when the album comes out and you start to tour it, because in the book there's kind of mention of some quite wild crowds, aren't there, and quite intense scenes. Were you picking up quite a following at this stage in New York, especially?
Yeah, we were doing pretty good. We were doing well, but you know, I could manage to fuck a good scene up pretty quick, so to speak. I mean, just it's like the chaos was what's cool about it. It's like, you know what I mean? What are you gonna do? You gonna become a millionaire with this shit? No, it's just not gonna happen. You know, so you got to like get out there and do your thing. And we're great with people showed up and stuff, but there were some incidences. Let's put it that way. And
Yes.
usually, when you're out on the road and you're playing this kind of music, you attract a lot of fucked up people. Let's admit it. You just do. They think that you're like, you must be crazy because you do this kind of music. So they act up, and really, this is a lot of times it's just, this is your outlet. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You talk
Absolutely.
with them all the time.
Talking of scenes in New York, though, because I know Suzanne Vega did a song called Ludlow Street, where it was a
Yeah,
bit of a scene house, and that's where her brother hung out. And I think I don't know if he died there, but he died kind of quite
yeah,
early. Was that a scene that you were also aware of? This kind of
yeah. Matt and I, the studio was on Ridge in Rivington, which is right off Ludlow. I bartended on Ludlow. It's back in the day that was a real drug spot.
right?
Uh, and there weren't many. There were a couple. Speaking of Beat Rodeo, we used to go every Monday night at the Ludlow Cafe and see Beat Rodeo. They played every night. It was like a party thing, and that was like the late '80s. Um,
Yes.
and they just did. They were like playing everything from Everly Brothers to, you know what I mean, to some weird punk rock covers or something. And Ludlow Street, it had its when I was down there, it was a drug scene. You basically you either went to a couple of the bars or you were down there for certain reasons.
Yes. For certain shopping
You'd see
treats.
certain people, you'd be like, after like two, and you saw them like at 2 in the morning. You see friends, you just don't even talk to them. You just be like, yeah, I know. This sucks. Not
Yes.
really, but this kind of sucks.
This is all true. So
Like a salesman.
how were you dealing with the audience at this stage? Did you cope?
It depended. It depended. Some of them got it. Sometimes it was we got into it a little bit. With
Yes.
crazy.
Well, did you
Yeah.
occasionally did you occasionally despise your crowd? Did sometimes you think, oh,
Not usually. No, not really. That's I don't. I'm not really like that so much. I don't know. It's the crowd. They knew what they were getting into when they came. And every now and then there'd be an asshole that would show up, and someone really fucked up. I remember a funny story. We were playing at one time. We were playing at Coney Island High, which was on St. Mark's Place, and Jim Thurwell brought me. He, I don't know what he brought. You know who Jim Thurwell is?
yes,
Yeah. Well, he
fetus.
brought this whole fish, right? And he threw it at me, And he was like, just because the fact, he's totally different now, but this was many years ago. He kind of threw it at me and he was like, I don't know, we were just doing this. And I said, fuck you fucker. And whatever. But there was this kid that was like, had pinwheel eyes. And he kept like, he was needling me and trying to pull me off stage. And I didn't know who he was. So at one point I said, eat this fucking fish. And the guy started eating this raw fish and he gobbled it. And I was like, and I literally had to go outside the stage and like throw up.
Yes, I think.
Because he was tripping or something, man. And then I, I just was like, this guy's like, fuck. I said, where'd you get that fish, Jim? He goes, I picked it up on the street in Chinatown.
Yes, and just thought, I'll bring
like
it.
this dumb, it just was like, but this kid just seen him eat it, because I said, eat that fish, asshole.
And he, yes, it's a sort of. So when you tour in America, what was the rest of the States like for you at this stage? Was that also going down well?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, we had a certain crowd, but they weren't. We would play someplace there'd be a bunch of people, and then we'd play someplace and there'd be, 15 people.
Yes.
And those shows would be more fun.
It's interesting because I did an interview with dear old Miles Copeland, who was managing the Police, and he's got that famous story where, they weren't doing much. They played in America, played in front of 4 people, but one of them was a sort of influential sort of radio guy, and it sort of is the thing that sort of triggers their career, and then suddenly the rest is history, isn't it? But it was this famous gig with 4 people that he loves to talk about. So, but he did in the interview. So, yes, you never know who's going to be in the audience. And did certain places, because that's the one thing about doing all these interviews in America, that each place has got such a different. It's like a different country, isn't it? From Athens, Georgia, Nashville, Seattle, LA. Everybody seems to have got quite their own little sound, haven't they?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it could be weird. It depended where you were at. You could be in. I remember one time we were playing in Iowa City, and this kid just kept yelling, "Show me what you got, city boy!" And he just went on from the first song to the last. Show me what you got, city boy.
Excellent.
I kind of liked him. I was like, this guy funny.
Yes.
And there were like 30 people there. It wasn't like some big show, but I was kind of playing for him. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, okay, I'll show you what I got.
Nice.
The pipes and gacked up, and but I just loved it. He just kept saying it over and over with this weird Midwestern accent. Show me what you got, city boy.
God, it all comes out, doesn't it, when you play regional places? So when did you get to play Europe then? When was this kind of trip?
It was pretty early on in the group. I mean, I have to say we got a little momentum when those things came out in Melody Maker, and I mean, I think that sort of made a little bump. I think because people, we don't really, I remember reading that stuff more back in the 80s and early 90s, or 80s more. But it seemed like that sort of gave us a little clout, and maybe it was because the booking agents could use it.
Yes.
Because we got some, you know what I mean? Because in Europe, England matters even more so than I think the States in some ways, for if you're going to Holland and Belgium and places like that. So I guess it was 94 or something, 95. We started going to Europe, and it just was, we were just doing better there and getting paid more.
Yes. Well, it's always one of those things I noticed as a sort of music fan, I suppose. When John Peel used to play anybody from, obscure band in America, you kind of wanted to like it because it had that kudos, and you felt like you'd really discovered that thing that no one else has, the sound that nobody else has heard, and that's going to be your band. So one gets a little bit fixated. So I think when American bands came to the UK at that stage, They were quite, because John Peel played a couple of your tracks, didn't he? He liked the band.
Yeah. He liked the band a lot.
And we had the gatekeepers. We had 3 weekly music papers: John Peel, Janice Long, I think Kid Jensen. But then in the 80s and 90s, there was the weekly music papers as well, or
Yeah.
magazines that started to develop quite strongly. So how was the kind of the condition at the band? Because there's quite a gap between your first album and then Uptight, isn't there? Which is
Yeah.
on. So what's that 4-year period filled up
It's.
with?
I think it's just we started bringing other musicians in who. Can we pause it a bit because I have
Yes.
to. I have to. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed.
Okay.
Yeah, so this kind of period of the yes, the mid to, I don't know, 94 to the next album, Uptime. What's the sort of general scene with the band at this stage?
Well, I think at that stage we like I said, we were calling some people in. I think more to do come in on sessions. So and it was just taking little different direction. And I think more groove orientated in some
Yes.
way. And just I mean, I think from playing live a lot, and also we did some bigger tours with the Blues Explosion. I think some of that had a little something to do with it because their stage thing was so ours was so much more chaotic and things getting fucked up and smashed, and they had this showdown, which I think Matt and I in some ways thought, well, let's try to combine as a growth, maybe
Yes.
combine both of that as a growing point, or I'm going to end up probably getting hurting myself anyhow. You know what I mean? Like just doing this every night, like what I was doing. So we tried to like tighten it up a little bit. I think that was it. And so we just and we would call in some cool players, some like some organ players, and I know Mick Collins came in and sang some backups and stuff. So it just gave it this more of a soul, a little more of a groove, which Matt and I always loved all that old weird soul music anyhow. So it just was taking a little bit of a direction change, and I don't know if it was that conscious really, but it probably was just from going out and doing the shows a lot, playing every night of the week for months, and you go out and you just kind of get out of boredom, you get your show down more.
Yes.
Started doing that, and subsequently it translated into the sound of the record. And Matt started getting some better equipment at his studio.
Yes, I know Ali writes about his amazing equipment that sort of
Yeah,
getting better guitars and better sound
yeah,
and
and
better
he's
equipment.
wonderful. If you look at his discography, he's done a lot of great bands at New York Head. It's a really great studio. I know some British bands have come over and worked with him. It's just a great lot of analog, some digital, but a lot of analog.
New
We
York
always try
has
to.
quite a few good studios because I did an interview with Martin. Is it Martin BC
Yes,
Studios? And that's
yes,
also quite. And there's a great film about that studio as well. I think that
yeah,
has dear old Jim Thirlwell in it from
yes,
Fetus and
yes,
Sonic Youth, and it was a Brian Eno connection as well. So
yeah.
was
A bunch of people
was that
recorded.
all around the same area that you were gravitating towards, or
I
was that?
think the marketplace maybe was in Brooklyn, as I recall, like right over the bridge. I think he's maybe had a few spaces. I've never worked at his studio, but I think Cop Shoot Cop did stuff there, and I know people that have. I think Boss Hogg did some. Very people I know have worked there. We just always had our own studio,
Yes, dear old
and
Boss
even
Hog.
even $5 Priest, I did 2 of the records at Matt's studio. So, and I did one at Green Street, which was this studio that might be defunct, but it was kind of a real happen studio. Lou Reed worked there a lot. We had this friend that was a manager at the studio, and we could go in like at midnight and get like half the rate. So we went in and did that, which was at the time a good time for us.
Yes. So when you went to record Uptight, which was on a completely different label, well, had the band changed its lineup by that stage, or is it still the core members?
It's as I recall, Allie played on that. Yes, yeah, she played on most of the recorded stuff, and then we got this guy Rick Lee who was playing live with us. And I don't know if you know Rick. He was in Skeleton Key,
Oh, no.
which was a great band. But he played percussion in Skeleton Key. He had all these kegs, empty kegs of beer things. They're an awesome band. And the
Skeleton
singer,
Key, you said?
yeah, Skeleton Key. They were great. And the singer, he's known for stuff. I'm having a senior moment.
That's
But
okay.
Rick started playing bass with us, and he was a great bass player live. But I think Allie played most of the bass on Uptight. And then the Blackout. I don't know. She played on. I think she played on most of the records. I think, as I recall,
Right.
but she didn't tour on all of them. She
No.
left for a bit. Yeah.
There you go. When you
Yeah.
came to record the Blackout, did you feel like that was going to be the last album by the band? Was there a sense of this is one more shot and then we're out of here?
I don't know if it was necessarily that. I just thought we were maybe running out of ideas, or it had maybe run its course. Matt and I think, thought it had possibly run its course.
Right.
And they do. There's nothing worse than you know uh, bands trying to sometimes you come up with a good record, but most of the time not. It's like the energy of it was a certain energy, and it just I don't know. It's like even now people go, why don't you do, I mean, we played live after that. Even we went to Europe and stuff, and it was a couple festivals, but it was for a couple bucks and to travel. To be honest, you know what I
Yes.
mean, to go to Paris, and my wife and I made a vacation out of it, stuff like that. We did a couple other things where we were over in Europe, but as a whole, getting in and trying to do it, it was just like I think we just wanted to move on. Matt was working on Heavy Trash with John,
Yes.
and I the $5 priest thing. Um,
And what was your kind of general health at this stage? Had you sort of cleaned up a bit, or was it still a little bit?
yeah, I had to. I mean, it's said in the book, and there's no denying. I had a bad heroin problem, and among other things too. And I did, and it was just got to a point where I just realized I couldn't sustain it and have a life.
Yes. So I've spoke to a lot of people who have had addictions, and they've all had different ways. How did you manage to get off the stuff?
Well, it was initially methadone, and then just uh, trying to not be in that world, so to speak.
Yes.
Because it's like, for one, and my wife and I, when I met her, uh, she just didn't deserve that lifestyle. It's I had it down pretty good. I had my whole thing down, man. It's just, but it's always a drama with that stuff. I mean, I did it for a number of years, and it was like I would clean up when I went on the road. But the first thing, a week before I came back, it was all I was thinking about. Was I'm going
Wow.
to get, and I'm going to go. I know my dealer is a block away, literally a minute, 2 minutes away. And I knew even a week before I would be like, yep. And I would just get off the plane, go, boom, get it. And then I was like, whoa, it's great. And then you get to a point where it's like, you're just not going to have a normal life. So I haven't done street drugs in a long time, years now.
Yes.
So you find some other things to deal with your anxiety, whether it's
Yes, God.
medication or something, antidepressant or something. Yeah, but you see a lot of people drop out from it, and luckily most of my, that stuff was to a lot of us was like it was just around. It was like it wasn't like this thing where everybody was on the street corner like, we were all pretty busy with stuff, but we just then when it got real serious, it's just like it's a wild scene and it doesn't just turn off. You're like, it goes on for.
Yes, God. Do you have to sort of fight it every day, or is it always there?
What do you mean? As in?
Well, as in, is it something that you're conscious of having to think?
Oh, of course. I mean, any person that's an addict is conscious of anything. You have to watch everything because you're gonna, it's I never believed this until I was in at one point years back. I was in a rehab and they said that this is a disease, and I was like, nah. And they're like, no, it is, and it is.
Yes.
It is. So it's like it's if you don't watch yourself, you could, there's nothing like turning the volume down, But I looked up to all those people, William Burroughs, all those, you know what I mean? You look up to all those Herbert Honke, all those junkies. He thought it was cool. And it was. I had a lot of good times too. Being
Yes,
high in my head. But you just don't, you're not productive anymore. That's really, I'm not trying to glorify it at all. It's like, it's not a good scene to get into, but people get out of it all the time, and they do, and you can, but I think now I don't even know what the way the situation is here. I see people that are on it, not people I know, but on the streets, and it's like, it's all fentanyl or something. And it's like, it's probably the same way in England. I'm not sure, but people are fucked up, man. Like they're just in a whole different high category. I don't even know what it is.
God.
It's like being knocked out sort of thing.
It's not good. So how does the band finish? Do you have a moment where you will sit around and say, this is the end, or do you?
No, we didn't really do that. I think we just left it. We just didn't really talk about it. We didn't sit and have some meeting and say, okay, the band's over, man.
Yes.
Let's do the last gig. No, we didn't do that.
So, because I'm always curious, how does a band sort of then sort out its kind of, I don't know, accounts, admin, equipment? You must have things that you think, oh yeah, we need to sort that out, don't we? Who's got the bits and pieces that were the band?
Well, I didn't have to worry about that so much because I was the singer. So, but honestly, Matt had most of the stuff because Matt had a studio, and he was kind of a equipment nerd,
Yes.
And we did keep a backline in Europe, so we didn't have to rent stuff, and that's Matt's. And he may even use it to this day. I don't know if he goes over there and plays with people. I haven't spoke with him in a while, so I don't know doing that.
Because the other thing that happens with a lot of people who finish for the band, it's like suddenly, wow, what does your day consist of? And often, people find themselves wandering around feeling a little bit kind of lost. How did you navigate that next period before you started your?
Well, I started doing $5 Priest, and I started doing that, just working on that sort of stuff, and I write a lot, and I've done other projects as well. I just try to stay keeping busy doing music. And, my wife and I, she runs a restaurant, so we're busy with that.
Right. My God, you've got a restaurant as well.
Yeah, that seems to be a common thing among a lot of musicians.
Well, I know. I did. Greg Norton from Husker Du was a chef.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He has a place in Minneapolis, or
Well, he doesn't. I think now he's retired, but he
okay.
became a chef. He trained. He worked in kitchens. He set his own place up. But
Yeah,
eventually, you realise that you can't keep that pace going, can you?
it's really hard, man. It's really hard. It's like a difficult thing because basically I became a wine person, a wine director at our place, and just I do that because I was bartending because I always bartended when I come back from tours. I always had a gig
Yes.
bartending. A bartender ever. New Orleans, Boston, New York City. I bartended around the country. And I always liked it, but I started getting at a certain age where I couldn't do it anymore. It
No.
just too much to be on your feet at in your late 50s on your feet all the time. Working 8-9 hour shifts. I started bartending when I was 19. So I always had a gig doing that. When I got back from gigs, I would do, and it was always I enjoyed bartending. It's fun.
Yes. No, it's a nice little number, actually. But
Yeah,
then you
yeah,
brought out these 3 albums, didn't you? The
yeah,
self-titled one, Jazz Salt and Eyes Injected with Love, all
yeah.
on Bang Records. So you must have been pleased with that, kind of having that outlet to sort of still channel your creativity.
Yeah, it was a good thing because they honestly they wanted to do initially when they contacted me, they wanted to do like a box set of Speedball Baby, and like they'd done with the Beast of Bourbon,
Yes.
and we just it just didn't it just wasn't the right time to do it. It just for various reasons. And I said, but I'd like to work with you if you'd like. And so they said, yeah, let's do something. And I sent them some demo tapes. So they put them out, and I'm not. They probably didn't recoup their money. Well, the music's a lot different than Speedball Baby. I didn't want it to be like that. So it's a lot more disjointed, like James Chance plays on keyboards and sax on it. It's not no way because I didn't want it to be like that, but it has almost a free rock jazz vibe to it. You got to hear it. You see what I mean.
Yes. And you've
You know.
got, is it Ivan Julian, also a producer on it as well?
Yeah. He'd worked on some, yes. And the last time we played in Paris, Ivan played bass with Speedball Baby. So
Right.
he's a friend. Ivan's one of the nicest people in the world. I love Ivan.
Yes.
He's a great person and just incredibly talented. And his beats, and he had cancer and he beat that. I remember I went and saw there was a benefit for him, and he was playing at his own benefit, and he got up with he and Richard and did Avoidoids stuff, and just the way they got, and he just said he just said something, looked at Richard and he said, "You ready to do this again?" Something like, and they went into like a Voidoid song, and it totally shot shivers down me because it was like completely intense.
Yes.
It was like 19, and it was really not like it was really good. It was like the sound was just raw as a motherfucker, and it was just cool. And I was just like, these guys were real artists, man. This wasn't just some fad. You know,
Yes.
like punk rock fad. These guys had a sound, man, and Ivan
Yeah.
could play. I mean, he can really play.
Well, the Blank Generation track's a stunner, isn't it, really? So,
Yeah, well, they played. I think that's what they started off with.
yeah. Because when you did Jazz Salt, you had an amazing lineup, didn't you, of musicians from, like you said, the Swans, Mercury Rev. I mean, that's quite a combo. Did you enjoy sort of being the leader of this musical
Yeah,
combo?
it's working with those guys. It's fantastic. I mean, these guys have been playing music for years and with very intense front people, you know, and so they take direction quite well, or not. You know what I mean? And it's with Norm. If Norm isn't up for, he's just like, I can't do that, man, and I'm not even going to try. So don't push me. I just had lunch with him the other day. So he's doing a lot of solo stuff now. I was out on the road with the Swans, but another really beautiful man. I love him. Yeah,
Yes.
it was just like yeah, working with God. What you work with people who are really good. I never in my you thought I would have worked with people this good. You know what I mean? As a my material. Even with Matt, who's like one of the best guitar players out there by all, and particularly in that genre of what he does, disjointed rock and roll. There's very few people who do it as well as he does, and I
Yes.
really,
Have
you know,
you, because you mentioned it slightly, archiving all your material? Because actually it's quite hard to get hold of, isn't it? Both, your bands. How come it's never been kind of given a lovely, lavish box set and interesting sleeve notes?
well, I think with Speedball Baby, it could happen. There's some personal things. Matt and I had some issues concerning some stuff, and not ever music or talent stuff because we just had some other issues, which that's just personal stuff,
Hmm.
and I think that we also I don't know. I think we kind of liked where it's at because sometimes people just jump on things to do them, and I don't know. I like that people are sort of. I get a lot of people that now that write and say, I didn't really. I had a friend recently who's a musician guy who's been on records and has a name. He never really listened to Speedball Baby much because he always thought it was just this downtown weird thing, and he said, I've been listening to your records lately, and they're really interesting. And he's more of a music, he just thought we were trying to do that to the music
Yes.
world, and that wasn't the case. And it was nice to hear that, and I've been hearing that from people. It's like, and I'm not saying that people caught up to us. It's like we weren't that innovative, but it's we were doing something interesting,
Yeah.
and I think that's why we don't push to do it. But I feel lucky that Bang even put those records out because there's no commercial viability at all. In fact, the Jazz Salt Cargo wouldn't even they wouldn't distribute it because if you look at the cover, it's a picture of a pussy, it's a friend's wife in a pool, but and they were like they wouldn't distribute it because they said it was pornographic. So, which I was like, that's cool. It's not going to
Yes.
not going to sell more records anyway. It'll sell more.
My
You know what
God.
I'm saying?
Yes. How interesting.
Yeah.
Well, God, it's
Yeah.
all
They
go,
were like,
isn't
no,
it?
we can't go with that. I'm like, well, I guess the Blind Faith record couldn't happen. I
No.
guess, you know what I mean? We could name probably 20 records that couldn't happen now. Uh, uh, you know, uh, we could. I mean, if you think about it, you start thinking about probably 70s stuff and even some punk stuff where Dwarves. You can't have a Dwarves. You probably couldn't have a Dwarves record.
No,
Girl in
this is
Black.
true. But
You know what I mean? In Dwarves.
I think blind faith is always the one that is sets the bar rather high, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that even to me is like a little. I mean,
Yeah,
that's it's funky because it's too. Our thing is not a young person, but it could be construed that way. I suppose
I
it
suppose.
wasn't
Yes.
that. I suppose, but we weren't blind faith.
No, this is
It's
true.
just an art project.
So what
I
have
mean,
you
music.
since sort of 2014? What have you been 2014? What have you been sort of then musically sort of heading towards for your next
Well, I've
projects?
been doing this. I'm really into this spoken thing I've been doing called Ron Ward and the Dream Lovers, which is with this guy Bill, who was in Bill Bronson, who's actually was in the Swans, Angels of Light,
Right.
Gunga Din, Spitters, great old Boston band. I mean, a New York band. If you can ever find anything by them, a great. This guy Mark Ashwell is a great artist. Was the lead singer, um, and we're doing this thing with this guy Ed, who's a percussion player. We don't have anything out, but we've been performing, and we do weird thing. We play record stores pretty much, and things like that. And it's a 3-piece. It's kind of almost like Cabaret Voltaire meets. It's very analog meets some exotica thing, and would me like reading like Jesse, uh, you know, the spoken word artist from Seattle, Jesse.
Yes.
You know who I mean. It's I do this spoken thing, and and it's really been great. We've I'll send you some live.
Yes, I would
Okay.
love to hear any links or any any stuff that's coming out. Actually, it would be fantastic to at least give it a play. Actually, and
Yeah,
to
yeah.
hear.
So we're doing that. We have some things set up, and I really dig that. And we're going in the studio to finish up the thing for the Taxi Girls, which is me, Fred, John, Grasshopper, and Chris Turco. We're going to go and finish that up and just do a little EP for this label called Fantastic Mess, which is in Australia. And
Blimey.
and maybe Bang wants to put says they want to put a full length of it out. We'll see.
So
Just doing it.
it's very. How did you sort of? I know it's a bit old hat now, but how did you cope with lockdown? Because obviously things weren't happening. Did you manage to sort of keep yourself
Yeah,
creative?
we're lucky. Now I'm at my wife. We're at our house. We were lucky to have a house outside the city, about 2 hours. But that's how I know Fred. Fred Smith lives down the road. There's
Right.
a and Grasshopper lives the next town, 2 towns over. All these musicians live up here. It's like about 45 minutes from Woodstock.
Right.
Yeah, but so we came up here and we sort of locked in. It was fucked up. It was a weird thing because we still had to go into the city and check on the restaurants because it'd been broken into. Things were weird, and it was like of New York was, and I still think there's a lot of weirdness going on from it. There's a lot of like weird homeless people that are. I mentioned this to you, but I don't know if you know this. There's this drug here called Trank, and I don't know if you have it in the
I
UK,
don't think
but
so, but I've seen clips of people looking like zombies just standing there.
yes, and it's a basically it's a horse tranquilizer,
Right.
uh, so to speak, and I think they mix it maybe with fentanyl or or meth or something. I don't know, but I've never seen. I lived during the crack thing. I wasn't my thing ever, but I lived right where people
Yes.
did time in the Lower East Side, and people were funky. This is a whole different fucking. It's really bizarre. People are just act like I've never seen before.
Yes. It's not good, is it?
It's not good. No, it's not.
It's not a good number, actually. Yeah, so there you go. At least there is. And is the live music scene happening again as it did in?
I think it's not like it was. But then someone might tell you that are out and everything. A lot of stuff happens way out in Brooklyn now because people can afford to go there. There are things that are going on. It's not like it was. It's just not. But there's still a lot of jazz happening. You can New York City is like you can pick up the paper and go see like a great jazz player, or you can go see. So you know what I mean. You
Yeah.
still can do that here. It's local music, like homegrown. It's not quite happening. It seems like a lot of groups just want to go from here to here
Right.
fast. You know, and it may be the same way in the UK. I'm not sure. So there's not really this underground scene as much,
Yes.
where people would just go dance, you know, and act up and have fun, So there's
Tricky
maybe
one.
some of it, but it's just not like it. And I hear this from other people too, who are kind of in the scene more than I am. You
I
know?
do remember I did an interview with an American guy who was, I suppose he was a producer, not producer. He ran clubs and ran venues and was on the
Yeah,
scene from the 80s and talked about the glory days of Guns N' Roses, of just everything going good. But now, since that lockdown, it's just people just want to go to raves or clubs. They not the live music scene, he said, hasn't picked up since.
yeah. It's sort of like that, and I think that it's the rents have gotten so high that the dividend to have live music, you can't pay the people a good quality of a person. So what they do is they get one person that comes and maybe DJs or something.
Yes, the great
Uh,
DJ.
but there are some cool stuff. We did um, the Dream Lovers did something recently at this thing called the Abasement, which was over near where the old knitting factory was downtown, and it's a great space, and it was like my friend Joe puts it on with some other people, and it was really great. It's called A Basement, and it's like uh, like pretty much all out music,
Yes.
but but cool, and a cool scene, like young and older folks there, and they're selling beer and wine just there. It's really cheap. So you don't have to go. It's $12 for a pint, and, $16 for a drink. It's like $5 for everything.
Oh,
You
that's
know,
good.
so and it was a really cool scene, and that reminded me of the '80s and early '90s of
Nice.
this place, and it's really just and it's in Manhattan, easy to get to. It's not way out in Brooklyn where it takes you a fucking hour to get to.
That's nice. I know this is slightly different, but I know we used to often go to Vegas because it was quite a nice place and nice
Yeah,
deserts. But we haven't been back since the lockdown, but the prices of it have skyrocketed. Have you
yeah,
found the cost of everything is just like, oh, that's a bit expensive?
it's pretty crazy. It's I don't know how people can do it. I mean, we're the restaurants in the Broadway area, where there's theater stuff. So if someone's to go out, even if you have money, okay, the tickets are, you have a big London has a big theater culture.
Hmm.
Um, it's you go and it's the tickets are 250, 300 each. Okay, you
Hmm.
go to dinner, $300. If it's you and another person, park your car. If you come from maybe the suburbs a little bit, that's $80. $1,000. I don't know now people don't want to do it, and I get it.
Yes, I
It's great.
just I've blinked and sort of realised that these, like, get a ticket to go and see Adele or somebody, and they go, oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
$500 or $1,000. You
Yes.
think, well, when did that happen?
Yeah. To
Like,
to see Adele.
yes, and suddenly drinks are $30, and you're thinking, how did that
Right.
happen? It's yeah, something's happened.
It's
And
not this heat, or it's not like something really cool.
yes, it's just very odd, but
Yeah.
suddenly it's become a norm that I think, oh, I'm not sure if we're going to do another American trip. Unless, I don't know, we will do, but it just was a little bit of a shocker when I started looking at the prices, thinking it used to be all right, but now it seems like, oh, this is going to be quite expensive, isn't
No,
it?
it's really crazy. It's crazy, man.
Yes. So look, if you could have, just lastly, if you could have whispered something to your 16-year-old self starting out in this interesting and creative world, is there anything in particular that you would have thought, oh yeah, that would have been a handy thing to have known, or oh, I would have told myself that? They would have probably not listened, but I would have done it anyway.
Maybe this sounds crazy. I would have taken more chances. You know, maybe fucked
Yes.
it a little more.
Never know. You never know. It could
No,
have.
I should have taken more chances. What the fuck? You know, you didn't get into it for the money. You did it for the kicks, man.
Yes. And there
That's
you
the only
go.
day. But then, that could get with my whoop whoop, could get woo. But
Yes.
really, I mean, just not to be serious. Yeah, everyone should just take chances, man. Particularly with music and art. I think that's a
Yes.
thing.
I think it was Brian Eno said to Bowie when they were working, he's like, no one's going to die what we do. No one, we're not
Right,
surgeons.
right.
We're not flying a plane. We're making an album. So let's just go right out there. And,
That's right.
they
That's
bring
right.
back Low and they bring back,
Yeah,
and
it's not, uh, heart surgery, man.
it's going to be all okay. You can always say, well, we'll do something different on the next, but yes,
Speaking
it's
of
good.
speaking of Bowie, I just bought a great. I found a great soundtrack of the Christine, uh, which is a wild, great movie that could never be made now.
Yeah.
And it's got all great songs on it, some outtakes from stuff.
And a German
Uh,
version of Heroes.
yes, that's why I got it. I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah, I love that film so much. Well,
No, very. Someone had told me. I think when I was at this, cool record store, and I don't know if it was Christine, but the other girl was the youngest junkie ever in Berlin.
right.
She was like,
Yes.
you probably heard that. I don't know. Which
Yeah,
is bizarre because I think she was 12 or 13. It's pretty bizarre.
it is very bizarre. God, I know. That's quite a haunting film, but God, it's so
It is,
good.
but there's something about it. Like I'm saying, you never will see a film like that ever again.
No, it does. I suppose the great thing with those films, they capture that moment, don't they? There was Midnight Express, wasn't there? Another one, and Taxi Driver, and
Yeah, yeah.
we went through these movies at a certain age. And went, Jesus, that was a bit heavy.
Yeah. And even I still like him. He's a pretentious but a fast binder. I love his films. You can
Yes.
over and over and get something different from him if you watch him.
Dear old
I just
Michael.
read like books about him now.
Yes, this is always tempting.
All
But
right.
look, thank you. This has been amazing. And
Okay.
thank
Good.
you. And
I hope you
if you've got any material, do you just drop us any,
I will.
like links or
Absolutely. Of
anything?
course. It was a real pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you. And have a lovely
Okay.
day. I'm going to go to bed.
You
See you
too.
later.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Cheers. Sleep tight.
Bye. And that was me in conversation with Ron Ward. As he mentioned, various bands, including Speedball Baby. Do check out the book by Ali Smith as well, that's come out very recently. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. Keep it positive, keep it groovy. Also, all these interviews have been archived. Aren't you lucky? So you can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.